You only begin to understand some things when you step into another person's shoes. I realized this when I became a father. My parents always scolded me in my childhood and youth for late walks, torn knees, black eyes, broken wash basins in the school bathroom, and other pranks. I never took their words seriously. It seemed to me that this was normal, not dangerous, and quite expected. I couldn't imagine how my mother blushed in front of the school principal, how she went to apologize to the parents of the friends I had beaten, and how she didn't sleep until late at night, until I returned. How she sewed up my pants and collected pennies for pennies when she had to buy new ones. And this happened very often. Ellie and I unexpectedly started dating. My friend Joseph brought me and two other guys to the company of his then girlfriend and her girlfriends. We just wandered around the centre for a while, sat on benches and drank coffee. Of course, I'm lying that it wasn't coffee at all. We laughed. Well, how young people usually spend their time. Of all the girls, I liked the quietest and calmest. At first glance, I was lost in her brown eyes and, without expecting it, that same evening I invited her to a meeting in a more elegant setting. We started dating. My friends still didn't believe that we had found common ground. I was a bully robber, and she was a beauty, an excellent student, and a smart girl. And more than a year later we got married. Of course, I got smart, but you can't change your character at the click of a finger. I found a good job, began to take care of myself, control my emotions, simply grew up and felt responsible for myself and my wife. She was an excellent hostess. She knew the recipes by heart, always kept the house clean, and got along well with my mother. Why did God reward you with such a wife? Sometimes my mum would exclaim, "You're such a jerk and such a sweet girl. There's order everywhere. He tolerates everyone. He takes care of you. It's just lucky that she didn't reject you the first night, that she tried to see something good in you." But I still can't figure out what she saw then. Mom, of course, was exaggerating a little. I was a good husband. I didn't offend Ellie. I didn't go on a binge. I didn't make a scene. I brought a good salary. I didn't look at other women. In general, I behaved like a decent husband. But there were moments that made us strikingly different. She's a quiet person. I even joked that she went to friends' birthday parties to try new dishes and then write down their recipe. Ellie preferred to stay at home, knit, do the cleaning, and generally do something useful. I was usually the centre of the company, joking loudly, having a drink, dancing, singing karaoke, and telling jokes. At this time, Ellie usually sat on the sidelines and talked to one of her friends, and when I started making jokes with black humour, she could twirl her finger softly at her temple so that no one but me could see. Well, she couldn't understand how anyone could laugh at such topics. What does such a bully have in common with a cute little girl? My friends told me, "Can't she see how you're reacting? Or have you bewitched her? Admit it, did you take her T-shirt and go to the fortune teller with it?" I laughed out loud at such jokes, and deep down I thanked fate for bringing us together. But fate had its own plans in this regard, and very nasty ones. Although is it possible to blame higher powers where a person behaved more than ugly? And 4 years after the wedding, Ellie confessed that she was pregnant. I can't tell you how happy I was. And then I started thinking about fatherhood. I thought like this: if a child takes after me in character, it will be a blockage. How many times have I climbed construction sites, jumped around garages, knocked down other people's apple trees, rode my bike along the road, and descended into abandoned basements? What if my child starts behaving the same way? And if it's even worse? It was only on the eve of fatherhood that I suddenly realized how dangerous it was. How scary it is to let a child go into this already complicated world. And if he also starts declining where he doesn't get to, this is generally a reason for a heart attack from his parents. The day of the birth has arrived. I couldn't find a place for myself. I was sitting under the hospital, and I didn't feel gravity. It seemed to me that I was about to fly. One thought was throbbing in my head. If only my son would not take after me, a blockhead, but his wife, a quiet one. This would allow me not to turn grey by the age of 30, save at least some of my nerves, and be sure that my child would live to adulthood. Unaware of the huge mystery surrounding the birth of my son, I naively believed that the universe had rewarded me with another gift. To be honest, I probably blurted out something like that at the very moment when my son was born, because my wish undoubtedly came true 100%. It wasn't until my boy started walking that I started thinking, he doesn't look like me at all, not a bit. At first, I was thrilled about it. I held on to the hope that he wouldn't stir up the kind of mischief I was notorious for back in my day. And as for my Ellie, well, she'd been the epitome of responsibility ever since she was a little girl. As her mother used to joke, the worst rebellion she ever staged was stepping into a puddle with her sandal. We doted on Asher, spoiled him silly, if I'm being honest. We gave him nothing but the best, poured all our love and effort into him. Ellie adored her son, and it warmed my heart how perfectly their personalities aligned, like they were cut from the same cloth. I basked in the harmony of it all until little inconsistencies began to surface. For starters, I'm dark-haired, and so is my wife. Yet, here was our boy, blonde as a summer field. At first, I brushed it off without a second thought. Why dwell on something trivial? My mother, with her medical expertise, reassured me, saying, "It's not unusual. Most kids' hair darkens in time. You'll see, once his follicles strengthen, his hair will grow thicker, richer, and the pigment will kick in. Give it a couple of years." Who am I to dispute her merits? So I waited. But by the time Asher turned 4, I couldn't shake the nagging thought. His hair hadn't darkened. In fact, the noticeable bald patches on his temples persisted. It didn't exactly scare me, but it made me feel uncomfortable. After all, children can be violent, and I couldn't help but worry that it might complicate my boy's school life. I'd seen it firsthand. Back in my school days, there was a classmate with a similar predicament. We weren't mean-spirited, but the teasing came easily. Grandpa, we'd call him, joking that he was already balding before adulthood. Now I look back and cringe at how insensitive we were, even if it was all in jest. Strangely enough, that same friend ended up playing a pivotal role in my life. He's the one who dragged me out for the walk where I first met Ellie. Funny how life works, huh? Too bad things didn't pan out for him with the girl he liked back then. As for his hair, it doesn't bother him in the slightest these days. He's embraced it. And honestly, we've all gotten used to it too. But back then, when it came to Asher, it felt like a catastrophe. Time marched on, and our little one grew older. The differences became more pronounced. While he'd once been a miniature version of Ellie, his features started shifting, morphing into someone I couldn't quite place. I'd catch myself staring, trying to pin down who he resembled most. The eyes? Not mine. Those were definitely Ellie's. The smile. Well, it wasn't mine, but it didn't look quite like hers either. And the nose? That was completely foreign. Then there were the ears, small and neat, unlike my noticeably prominent ones. At least he dodged that bullet. But that hair color, and those stubborn bald patches, they were unmistakable. They screamed Joseph. Joseph's, for crying out loud. The same blonde locks, the same thinning hairline, and even, now that I thought about it, the same nose. My stomach dropped as the realization hit me. I wanted to brush the thought aside, slap myself, even for daring to think it. But it clung to me like a shadow. Unable to resist, I dug out old photos of Joseph and started comparing. Too many similarities to ignore. That's when I knew I had to confront Ellie. I tried to play it cool at first, mentioning how my parents had been teasing that Asher didn't resemble me. But the joke was wearing thin. So, I cut to the chase and asked her outright, "Are you involved with Joseph?" I didn't stop there. I laid out the evidence, handing her a photo of our son alongside one of Joseph. She froze. I could see she hadn't anticipated this, hadn't prepared for it. Her face was a mess of emotions, and before she could even form a coherent sentence, the tears started. Her sobbing said more than words ever could. That was it. I didn't need any more proof. As I watched my wife crumble in front of me, I felt our family, our life together, beginning to unravel. It was as though someone was dismantling a beautiful, intricate puzzle, piece by piece, and tossing each part into a fire. Ellie tried to explain, but her words were lost in the flood of tears and tangled emotions. What little I managed to grasp painted an all too clear picture. Joseph, my so-called friend, had been around to help me with bathroom renovations one summer. I remembered how Ellie had taken care of him during those days, serving him lunch, fetching tools. And apparently, one afternoon, she'd served him more than just a bowl of soup. The thought hit like a punch to the gut. Sweet, quiet, dependable Ellie. She'd somehow managed to cross that line and, well, give birth to my friend's child. We divorced soon after. I couldn't bring myself to care about what happened next. Whether she and Joseph ended up together or not. None of my business anymore. My focus had shifted to one singular goal, tearing out every last tile in that bathroom, ripping it apart, piece by piece, and starting fresh. Maybe, just maybe, it would help me feel a little better.